A solution for peace between Israel and Palestine offers no clear-cut solutions and challenges on every side. Mike Daly of Interfaith Peace Builders and author Mark Braverman discuss possible solutions and what is essential for peace.
So you have two wise experts here. Right now, what is peace in that region? What would peace be between Israel and Palestine?
Israel has to learn to share. Okay. Israel has to get over its who did I hear this from? I heard this from Amjad Attallah, who works for our think tank here in Washington. He said, you need to understand that Israel, political Zionism, is like the Queen Mary. It's a big, big ship. And it's been going in the same direction for close to 100 years. And that direction is we need to establish a Jewish state, a Jewish homeland in historic Palestine. And we have to have control. Otherwise, they're going to come and kill us. Until that fundamental belief and worldview changes, the politics of Israel are not going to change. And Israel will continue to do what it's doing, which is to take military, economic, and political control of the entire territory. As long as that's happening, there cannot be justice for the Palestinian people, for the indigenous population of that area who lived there and still live there and were the population until the European Jews started to come, over 100 years ago. Until that happens, not only will the current people living there not have justice, but there will be no acknowledgement of the massive injustice that was done 62 years ago. So there'll never be peace until that starts to change. So there's work to be done, but it can be done. But I see that ultimately the solution is not going to be a Jewish state. The Jewish state cannot be democratic, and it cannot bring justice. It seemed like a good idea at the time if you were Theodore Herzl living in Europe 100 years ago. It's not a good idea anymore.
Talk about the prospect of the one-state solution and also what you think peace would be in that region.
Well, the one-state solution is exactly what Mark concluded with, which is a state for the peoples of the land. Just like South Africa now is one person, one vote. It's a democracy, with lots of problems still, obviously. So that's the one-state.
So would it absolve the boundaries, and so that map we saw in the beginning would just be one unified place with one government and all people living together?
That's the one-state solution,
okay.
Yes. Is that from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea, all of Gaza, Israel proper, and the West Bank would be one secular democratic state for all of its peoples.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the two-state solution.
The two-state solution would be where that green line is. You'd have the West Bank and Gaza as its own state, the state of Palestine, and you'd have Israel remaining within its borders, pre-1967 being Israel. Mm-hmm. Monolithic view from pretty much everyone we met. The two-state solution, which is what our administration talks about, which is what the Israeli government talks about, which is what the PA talks about, isn't possible anymore. It's just not. It's not practically feasible on the ground. You have 500,000 people who've now been settled in the West Bank, who've been living there, some of them since 1967. People my age have grown up and known only one home, and that's in the West Bank on illegally confiscated Palestinian territory. How are those people going to leave? That's their home. They have an attachment to it, the way that I have an attachment to the family home I grew up in. The populations are so interconnected that there's no viable Palestinian state. The Israelis don't seem to be willing to leave the settlements. There's a large, strong settler movement. And the Israelis aren't going to give up control of the water resources, the aquifer, the airspace, the Jordan River. There just isn't a viable two-state solution anymore. The wall takes land. The water's being taken. It's unfortunate because that's what everyone's talking about, but I just don't see it happening on the ground.
I think that we probably are going to have a one-state solution as soon as they put the so-called two-state solution into effect.
Because
it may be called a two-state solution, but if it's anything close to the facts on the ground now, which I believe it probably will be, you will have one apartheid state. There will be Palestinian areas, and maybe there'll be a Palestinian flag and a Palestinian currency and a so-called Palestinian government, but it will be broken up into little enclaves, Bantustans, just like in South Africa during apartheid. Israel will have complete military and economic control over most of it. And in effect, it'll be a single apartheid state that's called something else. That's my fear, that that's what's going to happen, because there will not be justice for the Palestinian people and it won't work.
But what makes you most hopeful? I mean, you have a very clear message of calling out to the United States people to raise their consciousness and activism here. But what makes you most hopeful that you actually think you will see a peaceful solution in Israel and Palestine?
There is small, and so far politically not very powerful, but deep-rooted nonviolent resistance to injustice. That lives deep in the human spirit. It's ultimately bigger and more powerful than governments. And that's what's going to ultimately prevail. It may take a long time. There may be more blood. In the meantime, there will be a lot of very difficult, unworkable political solutions that will be attempted, but nothing's going to work until people's dignity on both sides is respected. The Palestinians need to have full civil and human rights. Israelis need to stop, cannot continue to live behind the walls of a fortress, which is how they live now. So that ultimately is not going to work, and people will not be able to put up with it forever. But I really think it needs to, we have one world now. It's one global community. And that's why it's so important for people to go over there and come back and say, here's what I saw, here's what's really going on, we all know what this is, we all know what this means, and we all need to stay connected and support those elements there in the region that are working in that direction.
And what makes you most hopeful? You've done you've traveled many years, and so you've had a historical perspective of getting to talk to people on the ground over a period of years. What makes you most hopeful coming back from this delegation that you could actually see a peaceful solution, no matter when it would be, but what makes you most hopeful of seeing a peaceful outcome for the region?
A couple of things give me hope. The first is that more people than ever want to go on our delegations. And I feel like there are several reasons for that. One of them, the Gaza war last year, actually a year ago this time, I think introduced to sort of new elements of mainstream America just what the disparities there are, and more people sort of wanted to go and check out what's happening. This growing and sort of, still taking baby steps, movement in international civil society. There's a growing movement, I haven't actually said the word, but for divestment and boycotts and sanctions, which is modeled 100% on the anti-apartheid struggle. And saying that a nation state that has practices that are not in keeping with the international community standards, that are clearly violating human rights, needs to be sanctioned internationally by divesting from stock in companies that profit from occupation or from subjugation. But that gives me hope. The fact that this, in an international forum, more and more people are seeing the clear disparities there and wanting to take action. And I think at the end of the day, the fact that the vast majority of Israelis and the vast majority of Palestinians wake up in the morning and go about their lives. And remember, the Palestinians are living under occupation. They're confronted with a military presence anywhere they go. To go see grandma, to travel from here to Bethesda, you'd have to go through 3-4 checkpoints. And the vast majority of the people who wake up there go about their lives, want to live a normal life, express themselves politically through nonviolent means. I mean, I think waking up in Palestine is a nonviolent act. Not going to the checkpoint, not shooting a soldier, it's a nonviolent act. And to see those kids who are growing up and to know that they're suffering from oppression, but to see that they still see a future and they still want to work for peace and justice. And justice is a key word. They don't just want peace, they want justice. That gives me hope. That gives me hope that most of the people there see a future and are working for a future, a constructive future for both peoples. I can't imagine the violence that they live under or the fear that Israelis live under. I mean, that's not something that in my day-to-day life here in DC I experience. And yet the vast majority of the people there are working for, are hoping for, are striving for a better future. And we have to support them in those efforts. We have to do what we can here in America to support those voices, to bring their stories here, to get that international civil society movement even bigger and stronger.
Everyone isn't going to go to Israel and Palestine. You have a certain number of people who are going to go on delegations and find that interesting, but there's some people who are going to be concerned about conflict situations locally. It could be conflict in Northeast Washington or in some other state or another country. What do you find is like a salient takeaway in a sense of what would you say that you know is applicable to anyone that is seeking peace?
I've never quite gotten that question before.
Good.
So it's a good one. It just occurs to me that, I think an essential component of peace, which is really what you're asking, whether it's applicable here or there, this has been a little bit overused in the last 18 months, but is the capacity to change, right? To protest and to air my views against that big corporation that's denying me my rights, or against the government, against whatever it is, to fight whatever oppression is out there, for peace and for justice. But I think that anyone who's truly seeking peace is looking for justice, and they believe in the capacity of humans to relate to human stories, and to work for a better future. And there's a lot of education that has to go on. I think Americans are pretty much uniformly miseducated on this issue. But everyone that we go and most people that we go and talk to, once you learn the facts and you learn that it's a political dispute, again, just talking about this conflict, you can change them. And you can show them the need for peace and the need for equality. So I think that capacity to change the belief in that change is a very key point.
I think the global community, civil society concept that Mike and I are both talking about is really important. Americans need to get out of their bubble, need to understand what's going on in the rest of the world. Going to Africa, going to Asia, going to the Middle East is the best way to do it. Going to Latin America is the best way to do it. But in the schools, in the seminaries, in the universities, in the churches, in the synagogues, in the mosques, to bring in speakers, to see movies, to educate ourselves and to become aware, that's the key.
While it is true that finding peace is challenging, history proves that the greatest human challenges are always met. Forging peace challenges fears and deeply held assumptions and requires a willingness to connect at the level of human dignity in a way that transcends every division, nationality, ethnicity, and religion. When peacemakers bring that willingness to the negotiation table, they plant the seeds for peace. For more information on Interfaith Peace Builders, go to www.ifbp.org and visit www.markbraverman.org for more information on his book, Fatal Embrace: Christians, Jews, and the Search for Peace in the Holy Land. Of course, no discussion would be complete without hearing from you. So please visit the website, www.indepthwithkonyka.tv, and share your ideas. Thank you for watching. I'm Konyka Dunson, and please join the conversation.